This cannot happen. While Ranger Suarez continues to dazzle on the mound for the Philadelphia Phillies, his future with the organization seems to be more in doubt than ever before. As a looming free agent and sure to have plenty of market, I want to break down why it would be an absolute mistake for this Philadelphia Phillies team to just let Ranger Suarez walk away in free agency. Recording on the heels of an awesome performance from Ranger Suarez against the Astros last night, it did unfortunately come up in a 1-0 loss where he let one pitch get away from him over the fence for a home run, and that is sometimes how baseball rolls. But the realization did come to me while watching this game, watching him absolutely deal, be the best fielding pitcher that I've seen in my entire lifetime, just knocking down line drive shot right back at him, making the play and thrown over to first like no one's business. To highlight exactly what his performance was last night, he went 7 innings of 3 hit, 2 walk baseball, 0 earned runs to lower his ERA to 1.96. And over his past 8 starts here, we are talking about 53.2 innings pitched, 39 hits allowed, just 7 earned runs, 46 strikeouts, 12 walks, 1.17 ERA, and a .95 whip. In that time, he is 3rd in the MLB in ERA, 5th in F4. Should have made him a setup, man. This is a little joke there at the end. And I will note these stats come in before last night's performance, so even better in just about all of these metrics here. But the realization that came to my head last night is it does feel kind of certain to me that Ranger Suarez is in another uniform last year. And that breaks my heart as a guy that is my favorite pitcher on the team, even if he may not be the best. But I also just think this is an absolute misuse of resources if that is the way that things go down. It is not a successful winning organization if you just let talented players walk out the door for free. And that seems to be what is on the horizon for Ranger Suarez. Now, to highlight his production for the entire year, that he has pitched in 10 games, allowed 4 home runs, struck out 59, 51 hits allowed, 65.0 innings pitched there, an overall 2.08 ERA and a 1.031 whip there. He's been exactly as expected. He battled a little bit of injury concerns coming into the seasons. That is probably the most legitimate red flag in connection to who he is as a player, as there have been injuries that have popped up. I don't think he's as injury prone as it is sometimes made to believe there, that some people point that out like he's never active. That is not the case with Ranger, that he is there pretty reliably, and I think when you look around MLB baseball, that injuries are unfortunately the norm. But the real outcome for why there is not a future with Ranger is, for starters, that he's going to get a pretty penny on the marketplace, and there's just not really a spot for him in this rotation. And what I mean by that exactly is I do want to dive into the salary cap perspective here. So Zack Wheeler, we know that we have 2 more seasons after this, and he's been crystal clear that he will hang it up, but he will be on the books for over $40 million for each of those there. Aaron Nola is the contract that I think ultimately, as we begin to talk about this era or this pitching staff as a whole, maybe the guy that we circle back to regret. And of course, his contract overall is that he was signed by the Phillies to a 7-year contract extension back in 2023, November of 2023 here, that put him under contract until the 2030 season. Now, I'm not going to rewrite history and act like I was against this at the time. I think Nola is a guy who takes more slack than he necessarily deserves, that he is one of the more talented players. I love that he's a homegrown guy. He's been far more durable than is the overall expectation for the MLB at this stage. That is a guy that's going to eat 200 innings for you on a pretty much yearly basis, but this season obviously being a bit of an outlier there, that he is on the injured list for who knows how long. We did get this recent update in regards to that. Shout out to Anthony Sanfilippo here, who tweets out, Aaron Nola gave his first timeline for recovery to the At Fighting podcast, quote, probably 2 months-ish or so I'll be out, which is a long time, but it's better than a big injury. I'm very grateful it's not bad. And of course, they dropped a cool little 30-minute interview. Let's not forget that this started as an ankle injury, and then ultimately they found a little bit of stress fracture in the ribs here, that is the issue that's keeping out for the long term. Initially, when this first popped up, I thought this was nothing more than a clear your head type injury to put him off his feet, let him get back, because he did not pitch well to start this season. And to highlight exactly what those numbers look like, that he pitched in just 9 games, 49.2 innings, allowed 11 home runs, 52 strikeouts to 59 hits, a 6.16 ERA, and a 1.150 whip there. Not what you want to see from a 32-year-old right-hander who has made a case for one of the best pitchers on the staff for the entirety of his Phillies tenure. But it is not just about Aaron Nola and Zack Wheeler, as really the factors that play into this, I think, are the other names in the mix here. That we know the case with those top 2 arms, assuming that Nola does settle in and return to form here. This is where it gets interesting. They made the trade for Jesus Luzardo this past offseason. That is a guy that I can't imagine that they made that type of deal without having a long-term belief in him. And to his credit, Luzardo has delivered. Yes, I know there were those 2 outlier poor performances in which he looked very concerning there. But outside of that, that man has been everything we could have hoped for and more. And what most impresses me about Luzardo specifically That's a big game pitcher right there. That is a dude who stood up and faced that Mets lineup with like a purpose there. That he spoke after the game about how these kind of matchups fire him up a little bit more. I love that about him, and he does have some straight up stones on the mound. That dude likes the high pressure. That dude likes the moment, and he's got some grittiness in the way that he pitches. I'm in on the Jesus Luzardo experience and totally think that was a great move by Dave Dombrowski here. Christopher Sanchez, another guy that I think goes underrated in the conversation for how good he truly is. And this is a guy that they agreed to for a multi-year contract this past offseason, that he will be under contract there. So this is not a guy that is out of the mix. That is now 4 names that we've kind of concretely locked into. Then it's where things get really interesting because Ranger Suarez, theoretically, you could sign and he slots right back into that same position here. But what do we do with the other names in the mix? Mick Abel here, not the name that we'll lead with as far as a factor, but a guy that I'm very interested to see what they do with, as they brought him in and he's performed at the major league standard. But really the story is Andrew Painter. And we know that the Phillies have been quite expressive, quite open on they want to get this guy chances this year. We have not seen it yet. And this is a player that they've handled with some pretty significant kid gloves. They very clearly view him as the ace of the future or the top end of the rotation guy for years to come. But they've also been pretty expressive, and we want to season him a little bit this year, that we plan on giving him MLB opportunities this year. I don't understand how this all blends together if that is the case. And I also have been pretty open and want to keep making my message clear that anyone viewing Andrew Painter as the missing piece on this current Phillies team, I think is a misguided belief here. And I think it's frankly unfair to him as a kid that this is a dude who's still incredibly early in his career, who's still coming back from major surgery on his throwing arm there, that he's not going to be his full version of him as a player for probably several years to this point. And for a team with win now intentions, that's really difficult expectation to thrust on his shoulders there. So I think that should be kept in mind. But I do think the future belief in Andrew Painter is very notable to this conversation here. So what do you do with Ranger Suarez? Is there a world where you could potentially move off the Aaron Nola contract? Is that something that could be worthwhile or a team would be willing to take on? I'm not certain that is the case, as I think Nola provides a lot of value, more so than we give him credit for. That's a lot of money the team would be signing on to take. We just saw the Rafael Devers trade, which slightly different circumstances when you bring in the personality, the behind the scenes of it. But the Red Sox did not get much in return. We're just evaluating the X's and O's and that. And a lot of that had to do with the contract and the details that are brought onto that. That's a ton to throw on an organization. And I think factors in the Nola conversation for sure. So for Ranger Suarez in particular, we've talked plenty about the Phillies wanting to make an upgrade. Is this guy just the bullpen pitcher for this year and then he cashes out in the offseason? And for Suarez in particular, I have to imagine that he wouldn't be the happiest with that route when factoring in the difference in market for the top starting pitchers versus the top relievers here. We're talking about Zack Wheeler making $40 million. We're not going to be saying that about any relief pitcher in baseball. That's just the reality of the value of those positionally there. So for Suarez in particular, it's in his best interest to remain in the starting lineup. And Dave Dombrowski also took the slant, speaking to Jason Stark, about the way that they kind of expect their best upgrade in the bullpen is for some of these starting names to be shifted out there from the playoff perspective. And now that happens naturally. We've seen this year after year, and Ranger has been a guy that has shined in that role. But he's been one of the 3 best pitchers on this team from start to finish since he's returned to the lineup this year, and I think that should be put in mind. I'm not saying that they should trade Ranger Suarez. In fact, I'm against that. That I think you see this out from every single angle and until the entirety of this year. But I do wonder if Dave Dombrowski, if he sees the writing on the wall, that we're not bringing this guy back, does it make more sense from an organizational standpoint to get my maximum value and get something in trade return rather than allowing him to walk for free? That would break my heart as well. I think they need to find a way to keep Ranger Suarez as a long-term part of this Phillies team. I don't know if that means testing the market for one of these other guys. I'm not saying to move on from Andrew Painter by any means. You're not touching Zack Wheeler. Aaron Nola, I would open the door to conversation, but I find it unlikely that there's a taker there. It's really tough. The ultimate takeaway for me is he's too good to allow just leave. You have to figure out something here, and that just continues to be more and more clear to me as the season progresses and as this guy keeps pitching at a ridiculous level. So let me know what your guys' solution to the Ranger Suarez conversation is. The solution just sign more pitchers, that you just keep in a notable number of names? We're kind of seeing the Dodgers lean into that blueprint, that style of roster building, and their injury report is loaded with talent constantly, and they just always have guys waiting there. Is that the tactic? Can that Phillies always afford that type of tactic there. Give me what your solution to the Ranger Suarez situation could be. But the last thing I'll sign up once again is do not let this dude walk out of the organization for free at the conclusion of the season, whenever that may be. That is what I want to express here with Ranger Suarez. Shout out to him. Shout out to him for being the best fielding pitcher that I've ever seen. Shout out to him for continuing to be a key part of this Phillies team and providing some of their biggest moments in the postseason setting. And shout out to you guys for tuning into this video here. So make sure you drop your thoughts below in the comment section. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. We'll be back talking to you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.